This is our presentation on solar cell technology implementation by Mo Robbins, Patrick Desmond, Mason Zinman, and Will Osborne. So, what is solar energy? Solar energy is a renewable resource that provides no harmful greenhouse emissions and is emitted from the sun, making it an infinite resource. There are two main types of solar technology that we would implement into our country. The first type is the most common. This is a photovoltaic cell technology. Photovoltaic cells you see everywhere, on houses, buildings, you see them all around town, especially here in Arizona. These are just common solar panels that absorb sunlight and use an inverter to transfer it into energy. The other main type of solar technology is a concentrating solar thermal system, or CSP system for short. CSP systems, as shown in this picture, are a huge ring of diagrams that surround, or huge ring of mirrors that surround one main solar energy collector, which transfers the heat into energy. So, what is our problem? The problem we identified is that solar energy is not widespread enough in the United States. According to Chauncey Crail and Kareem Tynan, editors for Forbes, solar power has the potential to help us minimize our use of fossil fuels and the impact we have on the environment. The main prominent source across the world for energy right now is fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are slowly burning through our atmosphere and can lead, this is an extreme case, but can lead to the end of our world. So, the problem is we have enough sun because it's an infinite resource. There's just not enough collectors, or like the two main types of solar cell technologies. According to Joel Bankin, a master of economic law at Harvard, he says the US solar industry has the resources to become the primary source of energy. However, their supply is lacking. As he said, we're the United States. We have practically infinite resources available to us. The problem is no one just has the motivation or actually follows through with the plans they make. And also, according to Michael Posner, professor of ethics and finance at New York University, solar is the fastest growing source of electricity in the US, but it only accounts for 4% of the country's total power generation. The Department of Energy forecasts that solar would need to grow to be at least 37% of the US's power mix by 2035 to hit the Biden administration's clean energy targets. So, as Michael Posner said, right now, all across the country, solar energy only accounts for 4%. That means fossil fuels is mainly the other 95%, and 1% is probably hydropower, wind, and bioenergy as other renewable resources. Now, why is solar energy the most reliable resource? Well, according to a World Economic Forum, wind power takes up far more space to be the most effective, and as a result, most wind turbines are used on a commercial or industrial scale rather than residential. So, solar energy has the most potential because the sun, of course, provides infinite energy. It can be placed practically anywhere across the United States because there's always sun, and it produces no carbon emissions. Here's our first solution.
So one way that people could be incentivized to switch to solar energy is to increase rates for people with generic energy sources and to decrease energy rates for those with solar panels. This way, energy providers are not losing revenue, and it helps the environment and willing participants' electricity rates. This also forces customers to make their own choice rather than forcing one generic energy plan onto them. Another possible incentive is tax cuts for those who have switched to solar energy. 9 states offer some kind of tax breaks for those who have said yes to making the switch. One way the government could put this plan into place is raising taxes for those with generic energy sources while cutting them for those with solar. So, just to recap, these are the pros and cons. Tax benefits, taxes would benefit those who have said yes to switching to solar energy. However, those with generic energy sources, their taxes would be increased, and they would be burdened with generic, with higher taxes, and they might not be able to have solar energy.
Subsidies. What are subsidies? According to Benedict J. Clements and Ian Perry, experts in environmental policy, subsidies are used to encourage economic growth and help disadvantaged groups and carry out national objectives. So what if we use subsidies for solar panels? Well, an article by the Institute for Energy Research found that First Solar, an Arizona-based solar company manufacturing for solar panels, expects to receive as much as $170 million this year, nearly 90% of all their profits. So what does this mean? Locally, we are making a change with government subsidies used to help reduce the cost of solar panels. Now, what about on a U.S. scale? According to the Department of Energy, the Inflation Reduction Act was the single largest investment in climate and energy in American history. This truly goes to show how much of a change we are making because this happened in recent years. Now, this graph is only 40 years since today, and this is the amount expected to give every year. It is totaled to give around $900 billion, with the highest year being $50 billion. Pros and cons of government subsidies. Well, according to Precious Babunte, a well-researched teacher and a course designer, she identified the pros that subsidies will encourage economic growth and development. And another pro identified was subsidies can correct market failures by providing financial support to sectors facing barriers or externalities. These pros clearly cement the greatness of government subsidies. Well, this brings up the question, do the cons outweigh the pros? Well, also according to Precious Babunte, one con is market dependency, or that the market will rely on government subsidies for growth. Another con Precious identified was an unbalanced market, or that companies that receive subsidies have a higher chance of success, stifling innovation and hindering market efficiency. These cons identified demonstrate negatives for government subsidies.
However, both solutions have their limitations and implications. First, use of subsidies may create a dependency for small businesses. An example of this is shown by students at the University of Palermo who studied farmers in Greece. They found that a high dependency of common agricultural subsidies had created a dependency for farmers in Greece. These farmers had created a dependency on the money they received from the government. From this, we can assume that by taking away subsidies from farmers in Greece, they would suffer a huge amount financially. We can apply this to solar by assuming that any subsidies given to people for electricity would become a necessity for these people. These necessities become a liability once overdone. Secondly, decreasing the solar tax may lead to a loss in government revenue. Students from the School of Studies in Energy Policy at Xiamen University found that decrease leads to a decrease in government revenue. Furthermore, this decrease in tax needs to be compensated. The government does this by increasing other utilities taxes for the population. This means that decreasing solar tax will lead to an increase in other taxes. This may lead to unhappy citizens who won't view decreasing tax as an option. The best solution we found is providing incentives to expand solar. Professors from Georgetown University found that solar tax can help a wider swath of the target population take advantage of solar as a benefit. He also found that solar tax credit allows smaller businesses wider access to solar. This tax credit and push to expand has also created a rising demand for solar energy, which in turn has created increased advancements in solar cell efficiencies. This explains that providing incentives for the population to buy solar won't help it only to expand, but also will help it to advance for its technologies. From this, it is clear that providing reasons to expand solar is the best solution. Thank you.
Perfect, guys. Hang on. Got a few questions for you before we wrap up your presentations here. Okay, I'll go across here. Let's see, Mason first. Mason, how did the group decide to include Patrick's perspective or conclusions into the overall presentation? Like, what part of the presentation came from Patrick's paper?
All right, so Patrick was an environmental lens, and he mainly helped with the problem because the idea was that there wasn't enough solar panels widespread in the U.S., right? And we needed more of them, and fossil fuels were damaging the environment. So renewable energy would not damage the environment, so we need more solar panels to help not damage the environment.
Terrific, thank you. Patrick, I'll follow up with you. So Patrick,
Yeah.
give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of what you learned about Will's findings. How did
So-
Will's paper change your thinking?
So we'll focus on how other countries and other societies have implemented solar energy. And I was more so focused on just the United States. So Will brought up how some countries in Europe have different solar energy plans to help with the implementation of solar. So I know I hadn't researched that, so I just learned about that. And that changed my thinking because in those countries, it had actually been successful. And so that was just another thing that the U.S. could have implemented.
Perfect, thanks. Mo,
Yep.
what was one way that your team's resolution, that is the final solution you guys picked, made you think differently about your specific resolution in your paper?
Right, so we picked like incentives to be our final resolution. And incentives is like, we talked about it, providing tax benefits. I didn't really talk about that in my paper. My paper was about my paper was a futuristic lens. So I mainly talked about how solar would affect the future. And I didn't come up with the incentives conclusion, and we got that from Patrick, and that helped me learn a lot, and it brought a new perspective to my mind.
Fantastic. And then finally, Will, suppose you guys had 5 members of your team instead of 4. What additional perspectives or lenses would you guys have added as the 5th that you think would have helped to round out your presentation?
I think a lens that we could add in was historic, to see how solar taxes changed just in the last 10 years maybe. Because maybe 10 years ago we didn't have as much solar tax credit available. So to see how it's implemented in today, historic could have definitely been a better lens.
Outstanding. Okay. Thanks, guys. You are done.